Hey, everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And this week, we're getting back to some Bigfoot stuff with my buddy Scott. Scott hasn't been on the show in a while. It's been way too long. So, Scott, my friend, welcome back.
Good to be back.
Awesome. Yeah, good to have you back. Just for a variety of reasons, it's been very hard for me to schedule guests, and you know some of the personal things I've
Oh
been
yeah,
going through, and a lot of these shows I just end up recording like Friday at 10 a.m. or
yeah.
Saturday at 9 a.m. because I think I did one on Christmas Day just because my schedule's been a little wonky. Um, but this episode came up for a few reasons, and one of them, we've kind of touched on this in other episodes, you and I, and this episode is actually sparked by the lovely Rebecca, my girlfriend. She last week she had asked me what the difference is between Bigfoot and Yeti. And as her eyes glazed over, as I started explaining my
That was the
thoughts on it,
wrong question to ask.
yeah, and she's just wondering, why am I dating this guy? Why did I even ask him this question? Because now he's going to go into a 20-minute diatribe about Bigfoot versus the abominable snowman. But other people ask me these questions too, like why, what is this disparity? How are they related? Because again, like so many countries and continents on this planet just have stories of hairy humanoids, and I just thought, we could focus maybe just on North America because going into other countries, we're going to go down some rabbit holes, and we don't really have time to talk about all the different types. But we've touched on this before about how there are different types uh, of these Bigfoot-like creatures, and we can touch on Bigfoot versus Yeti real quick if you have thoughts on that.
I think it's believe that they're probably the same species, maybe a different subspecies or different type. I mean, they seem to follow the same traits and as they do in our in North America. So I would have to say my opinion would be, yeah, they're basically all the same, just a different subspecies or type or whatever.
Yeah, and that's usually my reply to people is that they're related, but they might be different. It's almost like, we have lots of different bears on the planet. You have panda bears, you have polar bears, you have grizzlies, you have black bears. Um, they're all bears, but they're all very distinct and they have their own characteristics. And Yeti are, are different. I think a lot of their descriptions. I mean, from a superficial level, yeah, it's a hairy ape man. But I think people think of the abominable snowman and they think of like a giant white, like the
White,
Bumble, from,
white, right,
and they're always
Rudolph.
thinking white, and that's not really the
No,
case. Like a lot of Yeti sightings are again of like the dark hair, the brown, the blacks,
yeah.
the
Red orangutan looking
red
ones. Yeah.
orangutan looking, exactly. And conversely, we have a lot of sightings in America here of white Sasquatch or like blonde. I know I had Gail Beatty on the show last year, and she was talking about a report she had up just in the Hudson River Valley here in New York of like a blonde Sasquatch. Not
Yeah,
not
I've heard that several times downstate. Hudson, maybe downstate, but Hudson Valley area there in the Catskills. At least two or three of white. So that's definite possibility, I guess.
Yeah, and it's just you do hear this variety. And one of the things that always struck me, and again, we've mentioned this on the show before, and you brought this up, and I had to look this up again earlier, like Bergman's rule. Carl Bergman, he was a German anthropologist, and he sort of suggested that mammals grow bigger in more northern climates. So where it's colder, and as it gets warmer, the mammals will technically, tend to be smaller. And this is something that we do kind of see a lot in reported Bigfoot sightings. And I wanted to talk to you about, because you and I, again, we've talked about this off air. We've kind of touched on it on some of the shows. But when people see Bigfoot, again, superficially, it's, yeah, giant, a large, hairy ape man. But within that, there's a lot of variation. Uh,
A
you,
lot.
right. And it's interesting to me that you have skeptics saying, well, people just have this image of Bigfoot and they see something in the woods and they just say it's Bigfoot, which I don't believe because I think most people, you say Bigfoot, what comes to mind? Like, what is the image that comes to mind immediately when you say
Patty
Bigfoot to
film,
someone? Exactly. And I'll
patty
throw
film.
the Patterson Gimlin still up here right now, just so people who, if you haven't seen the Patty film, you'll know exactly what we're talking about. But I would think that if this is just something that's in our collective subconscious, if you have someone down in Louisiana or you have someone up in Alaska and they see quote unquote Bigfoot, they're going to see Patty because that's what's in their mind. But more often than not, that's not the case. So that has always struck me that there's this difference in region and it always seems to make sense. Like where you'd think you'd see bigger, more muscular Bigfoot are up north and the scrawnier ones are down south.
Right. And like we had talked about earlier, I'm not discredit, I'm not disagreeing with that at all, because that does, I mean, like Alaska, British Columbia, you know, up north through Canada, down even into, the Pacific Northwest, they're very robust. That's what the majority of the sightings will indicate, that they're, you know, 8, 9 feet tall, then you hear the ones out of Alaska where they're saying they're 10, 12 feet tall, and upper British Columbia and up that way too. I mean, listening to the ton of, just like Fred in Alaska there, subarctic Sasquatch, he's getting a lot of stories about, the native people up there seeing these things. And a lot of his stories, they'll say they're 10, 11, 12 feet tall, Um, and like I said, I'm not discrediting, that rule, so to speak, but it always, like I said to you earlier, it just makes me wonder, does just the fact of them being in a harsher climate with not a lot of food at times of the year where they would have to really, struggle to get something. Is it that particular reason why they get so robust and bigger and taller and meaner and well, not necessarily meaner, but just bigger. Whereas opposed to when you get down south, the food's plentiful year round. So you'd have one species who's eating real good for 12 months out of the year, as opposed to the up north where they're bigger, who's they're only eating good, a few months out of the year. Like I said, I've always wondered that why just because they're up north does the climate dictate that they need to be bigger and robust because they have to look harder for food, or I don't know, but it just seems like someone who eats 4 times a year as someone who eats 12 times a year, you know chances are who would be bigger, you'd think. But like I said, I'm not saying that's it's not true, or I don't believe in that. That was just a question that I had been pondering for a while.
Yeah, and before we go on, I do want to mention that Bergman's rule is not really universally accepted. There's like exceptions to it. A lot of science says no, it only applies in certain mammals and not necessarily in birds. And so there are exceptions to it, but you do see examples of this. And I do just want to say to people, like, just because we've noticed these patterns doesn't mean you never see this. It's just
Hmm.
people down south will see kind of, they will report seeing like big patty type Bigfoot and,
Oh yeah.
and vice versa. People up north will see, scrawny, 5, 6 foot tall, 7 foot tall creatures that are smaller. So there's no absolutes here. And we're not saying that we're experts on this. No one's an
Hmm.
expert on this.
No,
Um,
just
so
a
we're
question that I have is all.
right. And it's just one of those things that I think, you know, you doing your research, me doing my research, we've kind of seen these patterns of when someone is up in the Pacific Northwest, typically what they see, again, not that there's not exceptions to this, but typically what they see is more of like this patty creature, which is big and bulky, uh, very tall, slow moving, kind of lumbering. People report these things as lumbering. They're big. And again, a lot of the thought behind that is the terrain is rougher. You're talking a lot of mountainous coniferous forest, mountains, these things have to go after deer, they have to go after elk, they have to, like you said, like they're kind of trying to eat constantly to build up that bulk because it is colder, it is rougher terrain. And down south, again, what we hear a lot of is like these, swamp boogers or skunk apes where they're
Like a basketball player,
right. They're
slender, still tall, but now nowhere near the girth or the robustness that the ones from up north, are described as.
right. And they're usually described as a basketball player
An
being a little
NBA
bit more
basketball player, yeah.
agile,
Right,
where
right, toned. I mean, the muscle tone and everything. It just doesn't have the barrel chest as much of his barrel chest as the reports come from the north.
right. They're still big, but they're not these hulking, again, it's
Right,
almost like linebacker, like you saying, like linebacker versus basketball player.
right.
Sort of the slow, lumbering, powerful type creature versus something thinner, more agile, quicker,
Keener
and
too.
mean.
That's
Yeah,
what they
and
say.
yeah, and that's another thing. I'm glad you brought that up because that's another thing. Like you sort of have these personality differences where up north, these things tend to sort of be more on the shy side. They kind of just lumber off. They get seen and they kind of just walk off into the wilderness. Whereas down south, these things you hear a lot of these stories of they scream a lot more. They throw things. They're
More
rummaging
aggressive.
through dumpsters. They're more aggressive. They're just nasty. So
And maybe that's and just a maybe. It's far more populated in the south than it is, so they have to deal with humanity more so than ones in, say, Alaska or the Pacific Northwest. They don't have the endless miles. They have a good habitat, but they don't have down south the endless, like out of the Appalachian Mountains and that, but as like they don't have as much room as they have in the Pacific Northwest.
yeah,
Where like expeditions, you watch these expeditions like Small Town Monsters just had one last night about the Olympic project, and which I think those guys right there are probably right now the most legit that's out there. I love how they've been going about things. They're not banging on trees and screaming into the woods, and it's they're doing a heck of a job. So I have to say that I take my hat off to these guys because right now they're probably the most credible research, team that's out there doing anything right now. But
yeah, and uh, I mean, I'm very far behind in the small town monster stuff. I started watching one the other day. It was with Alex, and he was in Kentucky. I forget the name
oh
of it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, but he had an encounter, and he had something on the thermal, and he was going back and like really trying to.
yeah. He had caught something the previous year and wasn't able to make it back, so he got back to the place where he was and tried to line up, with a partner exactly where that heat signature was, in size comparison to his partner of what he had, and they did an overlay of it. And, I mean, who knows? It could very well have been. They had deer on it. They overlaid the photos, and it was a pretty big thing. I don't know if it was much bigger than his buddy that was out there, and doing it live when they did it, but it was still, something that was you don't know. It looked like it was on two legs, but
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, and also to go back to something you mentioned earlier, as well as to tie it into small town monsters. We had done a review many episodes back about one of their documentaries. I think it was called Last Frontier, or was it Land of the Giants? I forget which one it was.
Yeah, there was something like that. I know what you're
There were a
saying. Yeah,
couple of them in Alaska, and there was one, and they were talking about, like you mentioned earlier, like these creatures in Alaska being reported as not the 8 or 9 foot tall ones, but like 12, 14 foot tall
yeah.
creatures. And again, you think if something is going to grow that big and be able to stay hidden, it could do it in Alaska. It's not going to do it down in
Well,
Louisiana.
right, and maybe that's why these things are more nasty because they're going to be, they have more exposure to us down there. Maybe I'm just spitballing, throwing it out there. Maybe, but getting back to the size thing, I know the further south you go, like, and I'm just going to use this as a fishing point of view. Our largemouth bass up here to the north get nowhere as big as they do in like Okeechobee in Florida or the South or any of those. I mean, it's not even any comparison because they don't have ice conditions. You know what I mean? They're not under, they're not iced over for a few months a year, like, we haven't been in a while. But normally, this time of year in normal winters, everything's froze over,
Hmm.
so you might have 4 to 5 months of solid ice. These things are just hunkered down, just eating enough to survive, where you have the bass down in the south eat all the time. The weather's fantastic, and that's why they get so big. Wouldn't that seem to apply the other way with with a Bigfoot? I mean, maybe not, because I guess, we know the deer down south don't seem to be as big as the deer in Canada. But so that's why I said I don't disagree what was said. I just have my questions about that. How it's like you said, it's might be more generalized, not everything. That doesn't hold true for every species.
Yeah,
Maybe it
and
is.
that's kind of the controversy with it because it
Yeah.
is an interesting theory, and you can point to certain
Hmm.
mammals,
It's not
bears and
wrong.
deer. It's not
It's
wrong,
not wrong.
but it's also not universal, so you can't really call it a rule because there are
Right.
exceptions to it. So if there's exceptions to it, then it's like maybe this is really just based species to species, like because again, you have bear who hibernate. So a bear in a northern climate is going to hibernate longer, so they probably have to be bigger to store more fat so that they can sleep longer in the longer winters. Whereas down south, you're not going to have the big grizzly bears. You're going to have black bear, and they're going to be
Oh,
smaller
yeah.
and thinner, and because they don't have to hibernate for as long, they don't have to pack on the pounds,
Right.
so they're going to be leaner and meaner, and you know
Yeah.
maybe take more chances, be more aggressive because they don't have to prepare for the winter. They can just
Right.
be like, yeah, we're going to be we're going to be around all year long. Whereas the
Yeah,
guys
that
in
could
the
very
north,
well be. Yeah. I mean, there's pros and cons for both of it. Like I said, I always just wonder that, though, with a lot of species are definitely bigger in the south.
yeah, yeah. So it does make you wonder. But getting back to the Bigfoot type stuff, it is something that for me, again, it doesn't prove that Bigfoot exists. I mean, that could be a cultural thing too, but it doesn't interest me that people up north tend to see more of the patty type, whereas down south you're seeing more of like this swamp monster type.
Yeah.
Uh, and here in New York, like the reports are a little bit mixed. It's sort of like a mix between the two. It's not quite
Right.
the big patty thing, but it's also
Right.
not the basketball player swamp creature from
Well,
the south.
this is, where my mind has been lately too. And there hasn't been out in the Bigfoot world. I mean, there hasn't been any new topics or subjects other than the Olympic project. That's really got my attention. It's like I'm hearing encounters that I've heard for 10 years. And I don't. I still enjoy listening to it. But talking about the different species. There was in Will Jevning's ideals. There was four, and I don't believe it wasn't him that actually specified that there was four different types. It was something that whoever, at the time, their information that they put this together, just with the information that they had, whatever time this was, but being four different, you had four different types, 1 through 4. Type one was like the patty type. And this is where I get mixed up, because it's just nuts. But and these might not be right. All I know is type one is what they call the patty. Then you had the type two, which was the one with the elongated snout, more like a baboon, which most people will swear is a dogman. But they see these things like baboonish with the elongated snout, and they're pretty nasty. They don't get as big, as robust as type ones, but they're still up there, between 7, 8, 9 feet tall. Maybe 400 or 500 pounds as opposed to 6 or 8. And then there's the type two, is what they're I'm sorry, the type three, which is like chimpanzee like, uh, more attributes to a chimpanzee rather than like a gorilla of a type one patty type thing. Um, that I believe they're well prevalent in what do you call it, the Mississippi Valley Basin. The Mississippi Basin is where they get a lot of reports of those, and through the South. And then you have the type fours, which are like cavemen more human-like in the face. Again, not as robust as the type ones, but still, like you said, they're more to the basketball player, pretty solid looking, streamlined, with the waist tapers to a V,
Hmm.
so they say. And they have, and the other, I'm just guessing it was three or four, have both square teeth and canines, but the type two has the canines that are more pronounced as a more than just like the molar, like the block teeth, and the type ones have the block teeth, just simple like horse teeth or big chiclet, whatever. And like I said, don't quote me on any of this, but that's along the lines of the differences in the four types. I might not have two, three, and four correctly, but one is type one is. But and then not only that, there's claimed to have several subspecies of each type. So whether it's inbreeding, uh, whatever is producing these, you know, offshoots of the types. And it just goes down like a family tree, the more it goes down because the more the reports come in that they try to put these all in a category. But like I said, I'm not 100% sure if I got my two, three, and fours right. But and up here in our neck of the woods, up here, I believe it's a type three. They say which can be between like a subvariant or a subspecies of a type three with the chimpanzee, but also human like qualities to it too. So that could be just another subspecies of the original type. But I don't know. I there's so much with that that I mean I actually do have other things in life that I got to keep in my mind way more than that. But so I don't want to be quoted. But that's a general idea of one theory of what kinds there are out there. You know,
Yeah, but
but
but that's kind of the main thing that we're talking about here is just that there does seem to be like this disparity between different types and uh facial features, body types, behavior, and it all tends to be localized geographically, where again, the aggressive ones seem to be in the south, whereas the shy ones seem to be in the north. And again, there's exceptions to this, and don't argue with me in the comments because I know like we're not saying this is absolute,
no, not at all.
not at
It's just
all, but we're just talking like correlation here. And what are the overwhelming reports? Of course, there's always going to be, like we said earlier, most of these reports, someone sees Bigfoot, it's brown, it's black. But again, every now and then I saw a white Sasquatch, or I saw a blonde one, or I saw, a silverback. I saw one that
right,
was
and that's not even right. The haircut, everything else I just described, that's not even counting the hair color
right.
or skin color. You hear not only the hair color, but you hear these have different colored skin. Some of them are black. I've heard a lot from Fred there in Alaska saying that the skin on underneath the hair was black. Then you hear some of them that were there like an ash. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? They're real coarse and crinkled like a baseball glove. But they're a gray. And then there's some where they had tan or like tan skin underneath. Around the facial area like that. So there's all different kinds of reports coming in with not only the hair but the skin tone as well.
Right. And you mentioned the teeth, and that's another thing that some people will talk about, uh more ferocious sort of teeth with really prominent canines. And then other people talk, like you said, like almost like horse teeth, just very
Yeah.
square, chiclet, um, almost more like human teeth, where it's more like molars rather than incisors. Um, and then the faces, you have some people who say this was absolutely 100% like a gorilla, like an upright walking
Right.
gorilla. And then other people will say, no, this was a man. This was like an 8 foot tall man, like the face. And you hear this from a lot of hunters. They say, I couldn't pull the trigger. I had this thing in my sights. I couldn't pull the trigger because face was human. This was not an
Right.
animal.
Yep.
So,
And that's kind of where I'm at too. I've gone through my phases of what really interests me in the topic at the time. So I am a big fan of Will Jevning's, his work, his channel. That's even getting kind of slow. They're rehashing a lot of stuff because nothing has really come out. Not that I mean, any reports, I guess, or any kind of new news that has come out to shed any kind of light. Not like there ever has been, but it's been really quiet. So I just listened to that, and he has an anthropologist named Forrest on his show, and she is 100. Well, in her opinion, okay. I mean, nobody knows. We all know that, but she believes that these are more ape. And every show she has to compare them, hear them to macaques, and there's not an episode where she can't start talking about macaques. But she wholeheartedly is her, I don't want to say belief, but her idea is that they're more ape. Now, there's a ton of that. I mean, I get that, but and I just heard a report, which is one that was pretty good report. I want to believe they were in maybe Michigan,
Hmm.
UP of Michigan, and they were four law enforcement officers, and they were out hunting, and it was a rather mundane, encounter. It wasn't anything really exciting, but they're all out there, and they had hunted all day or whatever, and they're back around their campfire, having a couple beers, not getting drunk, just sitting there, don't even, they don't have their hunting rifles or anything because they're just had their finished their dinner and they were sitting around a fire just enjoying it. And they're talking and they hear this snap as if like something broke a branch or a twig or stepped on something or whatever. And they said this thing stood out just on the edge of the firelight. Okay. That you could you could barely see it, but it was enough where as they're looking at it, it was so human in the face. There was nothing. I mean, and they could not emphasize. They three of them have clammed up about it. Just one is the spokesman for the group. The other three don't want to think about it. Obviously, their names are withheld, and they don't want nothing to because they're having a hard time seeing, believing what they see, and it's really messed them up. So they had, the one policeman there was kind of like the spokesperson for the group. So he was just saying, how like talking you through how this thing, and you can, in your mind, you can just kind of picture this, the firelight, this thing comes out, and they said it was probably 10 feet tall. So when you say a policeman says it's 10 feet tall, roughly 10 feet tall, that's what they're trained to observe. You know what I mean? So you can check that little box too. But they said this thing came out, didn't make any sound other than whatever it stepped on or accidentally broke, whatever right on the edge of the firelight where they were only getting highlights like the fingers and the face because of the firelight. They didn't see everything. There was, like from the waist down, they really couldn't see, but like the knees down because they said it was standing there and it was fiddling with its thumbs like this, down
Hmm.
arms down at its side. But it was like, that was something that they all three of them, had said. And it was, it's nothing like they could even imagine looking at, but it was human. It was so human. There was nothing apish about it. And that's what they were trying to say. They said, we've heard the stories, we've heard, they're like big monkeys or whatever. He goes, there was absolutely nothing apish, or chimpanzee or gorilla or monkey or anything about this thing. It was like archaic human, like a caveman. I mean, it was hideously ugly, you know, and it had, it looked to be like different patches of hair were gone here and there. So they all had their sidearms on. They didn't have their hunting rifles. They still had their sidearms on, sitting at the fire. Not a one of them even thought about, unclipping their holster or doing anything because it was such shock. It stood there, did this for, they said felt like forever, probably would have been 30, 45 seconds or whatever. And it just turned and walked and you couldn't hear it leave. And it was just like that. And that was the last night that they were spending there. They were hunting in the morning and after their hunt, taking off to go back home. And they got up in the morning and they couldn't find any kind of track, any, pine leaf litter or whatever it was, at the time there. But They just didn't, it wasn't even like an overwhelming fear. They said they just didn't want to go, they packed up and left.
Yeah.
But that was one that I hadn't heard and fairly recent. I didn't get the exact date of it, but I found that very interesting that someone would put that much emphasis on this is not, it was not an ape. There was nothing apish about it. I mean, at least in the features, you had the typical arms, and like the more of a slender build. They said it wasn't, hugely robust, but it was a lot more human qualities than anything whatsoever. Now, where does that put that? Is that just a type of a subspecies of one of the types? And are we talking about the same thing here? Like you said, it's like talking about the American Bigfoot and and the Yeti from Tibet, and the Himalayas. We put them in that category because we don't have anywhere else to put them. But when you hear something like that that is so human that you could only it was, at least if it was a apish, you can compare it to King Kong. What do you compare this to? Just a monster.
Yeah, and it's
It was
interesting
just
though
yeah.
because you do have the other side of that spectrum too, where you have people who just say, this was a big gorilla.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a big monkey, or people who just don't believe in Bigfoot or have a word for Bigfoot or just don't know much about Bigfoot. They're going to say, yeah, I was in the woods and a giant monkey chased me. They're not saying like a big hairy man. They say like a big monkey or a big ape or a gorilla. Like there's a gorilla in the woods, and so it just raises that question. Like, is this someone's perception? Because for me, Patty kind of falls in the middle. Like you look at Patty's face, and I could kind of see the case for both sides. Like I could
Well,
see a
yeah,
very human face in there, but I could also see
right.
it looks very, much like a gorilla or a monkey.
I mean,
And
they had said prominent cheekbones, really high,
mhm,
prominent cheekbones, but huge jaw. The jaw started, by the temples and
mhm.
came down, but they didn't see teeth, didn't flash its teeth or do lip flips or anything like that. Where you hear a lot of them, the rock back and forth. You hear that a ton of times,
Yeah,
but what caught there is it was just like this, what I mean, with its arms at its side, but just standing there like writhing its fingers, like you're writhing your hands like this, but just like it was just like, I don't know, twiddling its thumbs, maybe. I don't know.
yeah. It's almost like gearing. I mean, when you're doing that, it makes me almost think like gearing up
Well,
for a
it makes it,
fight.
you're
Like,
thinking it's processing, it's thinking.
hmm
You know what I mean? It's just like, when I know I do that, you're staring off into something, you might be, just twiddling your whatever, and I don't see, again, I mean, I don't see a more apish. I might be wrong. I don't know. It just seemed the human characteristics that they said about it was, kind of hard to believe there was anything ape about it. But I
yeah,
mean, there's the camp, like I said, there's that camp, and you get most of the, like Meldrum and, and a lot of people that are out there now, even a lot of the Olympic project guys believe that they're more on the ape side because of the beddings that they're found, resemble ape nests, and everything. That was a huge find that they've had over the past few years documenting these bedding sites and hand woven and everything like that, which, are like apes in Africa do, or
hmm
gorillas or that, so I get that. What are these things that are walking around that, look like a mongoloid monster, I mean, that type of thing. Like it has Down syndrome. You've heard that on occasion, or it just had like droopy eyes, or it was just, you could just tell that there was something not right about it, I mean, is that something totally different, or is that just a product of maybe inbreeding, who knows? But there's definite difference, and I'd like to know what the difference is, and if these things are categorized or all lumped in the same type of thing.
yeah. And I
You
mean,
know,
and again, I'm glad you mentioned that because you mentioned like Dogman, you mentioned like the bigger snout, but you also mentioned like the inbreeding because yeah, you do hear a lot of these stories, and again, we're trying to be sensitive here, but people will describe these things as looking like they have Down syndrome, like their
yeah,
facial proportions look like
right,
a person with Down syndrome, where it's, the eyes look like that, or the facial expression or the forehead
yeah.
proportion. And again, like, is that due to inbreeding because of a low breeding population? Is that a different species? And again, you have, yeah, like the very human uh reports where they say this thing had the face of a man, this looked like a
Hmm.
person. Uh, but then you do have the gorilla or the monkey or the orangutan. You have the like the Mayaka skunk ape, which looks very
Hmm.
much like an orangutan.
Yeah, if
Um,
that's legit, that's what it. I mean, it
Not
looks like it. You
exactly.
can tell it's not, but you can
Right,
tell. I mean, I who knows if that's legit or not? That's almost like the Florida's version of Patty because that's pretty. It hasn't been proven, hasn't been disproven yet. Let's put it
right,
that way. And it's
right,
been around long enough where you can tell. I mean, at first glance, you think it isn't ranked, but then you look at it, it's not
right,
in the rank.
right. But you look at something like that and you would never say, "Oh, that's a proto-human." You
Right,
look at that and you say that's a monkey, that's an ape.
right.
Um, and then yeah, I mean, I know your thoughts on Dogman. I think you know my thoughts on Dogman. Um,
I
and
like Pigman though. Pigman.
Pigman, yeah, last week's Pigman.
Pigman brought home the bacon, man. He was all right. That's awesome. I'm waiting for Lamb Man. That's the next one. I'll see if we
Lamb
can get one of
Man.
them.
There is a Sheepsquatch.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So this Sheepsquatch, that's a full-grown lamb boy.
Yeah, it's like a Sasquatch with the head of a sheep and it's got the horns and it looks like a lamb and it just so yeah, you do start getting into like these weird Bigfoot amalgamations and not to be disrespectful to anyone who's seen Dogman or experienced Dogman, uh, but it's a little bit harder for me to swallow that than like Bigfoot. Bigfoot, I can kind of say, okay, undiscovered primate, that fine. Like it's a stretch, but it's a reasonable stretch. Whereas for me, Dogman seems like it's in the realm of the paranormal, or misidentification. Uh, but for me personally, I do wonder a lot if people who say they see Dogman are just seeing Bigfoot with, again, a longer snout or just the hair kind of pushed up to look like ear. Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what Dogman is or
Well,
supposed
I
to
mean,
be, but
we're nobody to say, to tell what people say they see that they didn't see it.
exactly.
The only, when it comes or I'm asked about that, I just politely say I really don't know anything about it. I choose not to know anything about it, and I got enough to worry about with the Bigfoot thing. You know what I mean? I don't need to start going off on that kind of. I got my hands full. Let's solve one mystery, then we can say on to the next. And then find out if all these other kids, are you know
Yeah, and I hate even
Mothman.
I hate even saying that because I hate explaining one unknown with another. So to sort of say, well, Dogman is
Exactly.
just Bigfoot, like I'm just
Uh,
breaking my own rule there. So I don't really
yes.
want to do that. But
Right.
like I said, it's Dogman. I don't know what that would be.
No.
It's a weird phenomena. And yeah, like I know your wheelhouse is really more Bigfoot, whereas for me, I'm a little bit all over the place
Oh
with
yeah, yeah.
paranormal and ghosts and other cryptids and
Like I said,
supernatural
I've heard
beings.
all the dog man, all the stories and how they're pure evil. I mean, right, pure evil. If anyone looks at it in the eye, it's like they're seeing Satan, back, and it's just, and man, let me just that's too freaky. I can't even deal with that right now. You know what I mean? So I don't even entertain any thought one way or another on that because you know there's not a whole lot of variations from the dogmans, like the types of dogmans as there is with Bigfoot.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like, is it a German Shepherd or is it a Doberman? Or so
Yeah, and
I
again, like my thing is I don't like disparaging witnesses. I think if you think you saw something, I believe that you think you saw something. Like
oh
I will
sure,
believe you. Like 'cause I feel like the amount of hoaxers and people who are lying, and I think that's a very small percentage of people who are out there. I think if someone comes to you with a story, they believe they saw something, and I will believe them that they believe they saw something.
right.
Does that mean they actually saw Dogman? Does it mean they actually saw a UFO? I don't know. I can't say. Our role here is just to question everything and our own stories included and just say, we don't know what that was. I
Mm-hmm.
know what I saw. I don't necessarily know what it was. Like if I see a light in the sky, I'm like, all right, that's weird. It doesn't look like an airplane. It doesn't act like an airplane. but maybe it is. Maybe it's some weird
Yeah.
military craft. Maybe it's, like who knows? Like,
Oh,
so,
it's like in these stupid drones that everybody has now. That freaks me right out because I
oh
think I'm
yeah.
seeing something, and my wife was right there to say, "That's a drone." It's like, oh, I guess you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. So you got
I
to, you
mean,
got
and
to,
these things, I see these things zipping around, man, and my heart starts to race, and I'm that. It goes, I said, yeah, you're right.
yeah. So you got to be real careful. And again, because like Small Town Monsters did a documentary on Dogman, and they had all these witnesses come on, and I felt for these people because they saw
Mm-hmm.
something. They saw something that scared them to the bone,
Mm-hmm.
Um, was it Dogman? I don't know. I can't say. All I can do is ask questions, and that doesn't mean I'm questioning their integrity. It just means I'm questioning
No, it's just
my
like you said.
own.
There's more, I guess you say, physical or biological evidence that proves, not that proves, but leans towards the existence of a Bigfoot type thing more so than a dog. Because if these things are canines walking on, it doesn't make any sense because the bone structure of dogs are not meant to walk on their hind legs. You know what I mean? It's not, it doesn't make any sense because it's not physical. You know what I mean? It's not physically correct that they should walk. So then if that's the case, well, then they got to be some kind of shape shifting, portal hopping. I mean, it's just, I've heard those stories where the dog man's on all fours and all of a sudden you hear this clicking and things stands up and whatever, there's bones are popping, to let it grow, stand bipedally. And it had regular wolf's legs and it's on, but it walks with its arms down by its sides, which makes it, again, it just doesn't make any sense because if it's a wolf, a werewolf, or whatever, it physically it makes no sense. If they were saying they seen this thing and it had human-like legs, still it don't make any sense. But at least that's a way of bipedal locomotion right there, not on two spindly little legs that are only meant to work twice the time when you got four. I mean, it's just the physical nature of it doesn't make any sense. And then if that's the case, you're ruling out that it's a natural biological creature. Then it's got to be something else that's letting this thing defy the law of how dogs were made to walk, but this one can. These can walk on those on regular paws, like hind legs. I mean, it's just like I said. There's not enough there to make me believe that it's anything physical. It doesn't make any. It's just not right for a dog to walk on those back legs, and let alone run as fast as they say they run on two legs. It just, it doesn't make much sense. They're not formed. They're not made to stand like that. But then
Yeah.
again,
Yeah. And again,
I'm
we
not
all,
saying no. I mean, hey, I'm not saying. I am not saying that there's no way in the world that can happen. I just said it doesn't make sense.
right.
So
Right. Yeah. So again, we're not saying Dogman doesn't exist. We're just saying,
no,
for us, it doesn't make sense, and
just our
uh,
opinion. That's
just our
it.
opinion. And again, I'm not saying
Somebody
that.
is seeing something though. I mean, hey, I give them credit. They're saying, and it's scaring a lot of these people. And I mean, I don't know anybody, but just from what I've watched, they seem like credible folks who are seeing something that freaked them out.
Yeah, and I don't
Yeah.
think most people are that talented in acting to put that forth and to show that amount
Right.
of fear and trauma on camera. They saw something,
Yep.
and if they're saying they saw a dog man, then uh,
Maybe they did.
maybe they did. I'm not saying I believe them. I'm not saying I disbelieve them. I'm just
Right.
saying I'm going to question it, not because of that I think they're lying, but just
No.
for my own peace of mind and my own investigation that I want to know what they're seeing.
Hmm.
So yeah. So yeah, I hate I hate doing that. I hate doing like, oh, they just saw Bigfoot with a longer snout, and that's
Yeah.
ridiculous because it's explaining one unknown with another unknown.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's just people do see Bigfoot with these, a lot of them will say they had the long snout. They looked like I think you mentioned earlier, like almost baboon-like.
Yeah.
That there'll be like a
Yep.
big baboon, or I saw a baboon in the tree, like
Right.
a large, like a 6 foot tall baboon in Missouri. Like,
Right. Well, right. And they're said to have the dog men anyway, hands like raccoon, with claws, but big, big. big raccoon type hands, you know.
Hmm.
Whereas opposed to ones with the Bigfoot with the elongated snout, they have regular human hands, human nails. You know, there's nothing. You know, the proportions of the thumb might be a little different, but there's nothing, you know, monster, you know, freakish about their hands except the fact that they're really big. You know,
Hmm.
just you know. But with the Dogman, they have raccoon hands, which would look, I guess, they say, what raccoon their little hands look like only if they were monstrous. That's
Right.
what Dogman you hear about them.
Yeah. Yeah. So just
So
weird stuff.
yeah, and who knows? I mean, geez, you know, hey, like I said, till we, you know, nobody knows. But like I said, just for me, Bigfoot's enough to keep me occupied for quite a while.
Yeah, I'm just I am really fascinated by the different types. I mean, that is something that very early on I noticed and just reading about these things that, down south they seem like a different related animal, but very different just in behavior and in
Yeah,
looks.
it's like you hear a lot out of the big thicket in East Texas. You know, the same type of gnarly, nasty ones down there. You know,
Hmm.
was it the Fort Sam Houston Forest? Is that right? Down in that area, there's a ton of it. You know, and a lot of reports out of there is they're nasty boogers. They really are. They just you know, if they have a like an eye to eye with them, you know, it's like they just have that look on them like, get out of my face, you know, or they'll, you know, go by and slap the car if you're in it, or slap the house, or throw logs at you, or, you know, they'll go out of their way, maybe not to hurt you, but to let you know that they're nasty.
Yeah, and I mean, like, probably the most famous Bigfoot movie ever, Legend of Boggy Creek, is about the Boggy Creek creature, which is a
Hmm.
swamp creature, and
Right.
it's not the Patterson Gimlin Bigfoot that we all know. It's this tall, lanky, um, nasty creature
Ill
that will
tempered. Yeah.
yell, ill-tempered. It'll scream at you. It'll reach its arm. It's reaching its arm in the window of the house and
Yeah.
like trying to get in, and
Yeah.
um, staring down hunters in the woods. And it's not the shy giant of the north that just sit like,
Right. Right. You get that fleeting glimpse of its back as it's, you know, walking away. Like you know, you hear a lot, and then, but that's not always in the Pacific Northwest either. I mean, you still have reports of them being nasty. They're just not as, you know, you don't get as many of them as you hear from the South, you know, Texas or Florida, you know, or down in Louisiana and Everglades and whatnot. Yeah. But from time to time, you'll hear some, you know, stories.
yeah, exactly.
Washington
It's
State.
not a hard and fast rule, but
No, no, there's
again,
nothing. Yeah, there's nothing that's, you know, like you said, hard and fast rule to anything, any part of these things, you know. But that's what makes it so, you know, mind blowing sometimes when you just try to, you know, you try to think of. There's no box you can put it in. There's no context, no anything that you can, you know, put them in a box and just say, all right, you know, too much.
yeah. But to me, again, that's one of the more interesting things about the phenomenon because again, if you're saying people are just seeing this because it's in the collective subconscious. Like we all know about Bigfoot. So yeah, you put somebody in the woods or you put somebody in a swamp and they catch a fleeting glimpse of something, their mind is going to fill in Bigfoot. And if that were the case, everybody would be seeing Patty,
Hmm.
in my
Yeah.
opinion. I just think everybody, because that's what people think of. You say UFO, people think of a flying saucer. They're not thinking of the black triangles. They're not, the
You know,
first
I
thing
think
that comes
about
to mind is like
when I think of UFO, it's funny. Remember the Brady Bunch where it said UFO on the side?
uh-huh,
You remember that Brady Bunch episode where they were pranking Bobby or whatever,
yes,
and they had the Air Force come to the house, and the
uh-huh,
UFO was outside the house. It was a projection, you know, it was a flying saucer with the carnival lights on it, but it said UFO on it.
right.
That was that. You know, I'll always remember that one.
But it like, we have these certain things that we've latched onto. So you say UFO, people think of the classic saucer. They're not thinking of the cigar shape. They're not thinking of the black triangle,
The
the
Phoenix Lights type
boomerang, the
stuff.
Phoenix lights. They're thinking
Yeah,
of, almost like the George Jetson thing, just the
yeah,
dome and then the saucer,
yeah.
from
The
like,
'50s, you like
the
the early
50s.
'50s flying saucers, Martians, and you know, and
Right. Exactly. And,
you
you say
know,
ghost and people think of the white
cat,
sheet. You're not
yeah.
thinking of other things. And same thing with Bigfoot. You know, the first thing that comes to mind is going to be Patty. So if everyone is saying, if the skeptics are saying that everyone's just seeing this because that's in the collective subconscious, that's just what we're used to seeing. Why aren't they just seeing Harry from Harry and the Hendersons or Patty, like the stereotypical Bigfoot? They're seeing very different things. And even I keep forgetting to bring this up. The tracks down in the South, a lot of them tend to be three-toed,
Yeah, you hear a lot of that, three or four
three
toed,
or
and
four toed.
it's just, I mean, that's it's funny because again, I always got to go back and quote from Will Jevning's stuff that I listen to because he's primarily my go-to if there's anything that I can pick from it to share with you. But they were talking, and he made this comment. Now, Will's a pretty straightforward guy. He's no baloney. There's no portals. There's no mind speak. These weren't dropped off by the flying saucer. They don't go in between dimensions and all that stuff. However, there are two things that really surprised me when I heard him say this. All right. So I don't know where, I mean, he has a lot of sources, they call inside sources that, know more than everybody else does, but won't say nothing because of whatever reason. But take it for, what that's worth. But Will did make two different statements and never got into anything more than just the statement. One show, and it was like reading, he didn't bring it up. It was reading viewers' questions.
Mm,
And one of it is, what is your thought on the mountain giants? All right, now these things are supposed to be even bigger. We haven't even gone there yet.
right.
Mountain giants or we or that type of thing. Of way up north, from the Canadian border north, I guess these things have been seen. Okay, and again, put it this way: the stories that are being told are the same credibility as the people saying about dogmen. All right, so you can't say dogmen, don't exist, or just pick and choose. You can't cherry pick what you believe is going to be, even though you think you have it all wrapped up in your mind what is possible to be. But anyway, he had even said, he goes, they have had reports, he has heard things, but he doesn't know enough about them to come out and say anything about them. All right. So what I got from that was, all right, well, he wouldn't even mention it if it was something, or he would tell you right out, I don't believe this, this is nonsense, But he said about those mountain giants or Gugwe or whatever you want to call them, apparently there is some kind of evidence to prove that they're a possible thing as well. Again, you take that however you want. I'm not saying yes or no. I mean, I take it from Will only because, I've been with him so long and he hasn't made us scratch our heads like some other YouTube hosts have in the past. They've kind of gone off the rail on a few things. So, he hasn't led me astray on that, but it was that. And he made a comment about someone had said something about the three-legged, what leaves three-legged tracks. He said something to the effect of that he has a lot of credible stories, witnesses, sightings, information on whatever's making the three-toed tracks, and you don't even want to mess with them. He goes, I don't even want to mess with that. So when he says something like that, you know what I mean? Again, I take his, I don't want to say take his word, but if he's heard stories, and basically what he's saying is, yeah, that's a possibility too. There's something out there that does make three-toed tracks, and we don't want nothing to do with that. Think of that, take that however you want, but it's a credit. He's probably the most credible source, you know what I mean, that I get information from. And he might be wrong, I might be wrong, but I mean that's just something may be out there making three-toed tracks that you don't want to mess with. You don't even want to know about.
Yeah, I mean, that's again, it diverts into weird territory because again, you have a Bigfoot that has, basically an oversized human foot. I mean, there are big differences, and a lot of people don't realize that. They think it's just an upscaled human foot, and they say, "Oh, that's where these prints come from." People just take their own
Mm-hmm.
footprint and upscale it, and No, there are differences, but it's five-toed. I mean, it clearly resembles a human footprint.
Right. All the way back
You
to the 50s, the Jerry
right,
Crew stuff down there, and they weren't upscaling anything in the 50s,
right,
so those are pretty cut and dry to have dermal ridges like that. They didn't have people hoaxing in the 50s to have exact dermal type ridges like like they were getting. They weren't stompers. You had so many people trying to say that the patty film was fake, and here was I'm the one who made it. But when you look at those tracks in the snow, they look like they're wooden cutouts tied to a bottom of a shoe. They
right,
look like a contoured foot with dermal ridges.
right, right. So you have all these footprints that make sense in a biological sense. Meldrum has found footprints, this one's crippled and this one has this sort of disease that we see in humans and
Yeah,
the metatarsal break. I mean, and really breaking this down biologically, and then you have these three-toed footprints which don't really make a lot of sense. You can
no,
understand a Bigfoot where it's like, okay, it's somewhere in the, you know, the missing link or the evolutionary chain, and
right.
it makes some sort of sense because all primates have five digits. So what is this primate that has three toes? That is
Hmm.
weird, but still a very human-like footprint. It's not a handprint with just three. It's a
Right.
footprint with three toes, and they've made casts. And again, if someone was going to hoax it and wanted people to not look too closely, why wouldn't you just make a standard Bigfoot footprint to hoax people and not
Right.
get more eyes on it? Because you have a three-toed print now, more people are going to be looking at that and being like, wait a
Right.
second, you
Right.
know,
You're putting up a red flag for people to investigate more.
right, right. So it's a weird thing, and again, not impossible, but it's a weird thing for a hoaxer to do to sort of, yeah, draw attention to themselves that this is fake.
I try to stay on that fine line where, still scientifically, but be open-minded enough to say we don't know everything. But does it make sense? It's like another thing that you've heard, and you've probably heard a ton of these, that they found fossils of these things with two rows of teeth.
Hmm.
It makes no why. I mean,
Right,
it's not going to make it chew any better. It's not going to make you kill bigger animals. It's not, it's biologically no benefit to have them. Why? I mean, it sounds good if you've seen these skeletons that have, two rows of up and down teeth, and it's like, looks just like two sets of dentures put together, only one's a little bit bigger than the other, and it's just, but it doesn't, I try to stay in that frame of mind where it still has to make sense. I mean, it's cool if you're making a alien movie or something like that has several rows of teeth and, but it would benefit nothing, anything to have two rows of teeth. It just doesn't make any sense
right, and
other than
that's
other than to make it a cool story.
right, right, and that's the thing. Like we're looking not to disprove this stuff, but just give me something that makes sense in the biological world. And yeah, I was thinking as you're saying that, it's like the same thing. It's like, yeah, two rows of teeth sounds cool because it's like, yeah, the xenomorph from Alien or like Jaws, sharks have two rows of teeth and or multiple rows of teeth, and it sounds cool, but in a primate it makes zero sense. So
Right.
why two rows of teeth? Um, yeah,
Right.
like
It's not going to benefit. There's nothing it can benefit from. There's
right.
no reason to have it.
Yeah. So it's just
It doesn't make any sense.
no. So it's a
But then
strange.
again, if that's true, then it's not a physical natural creature then, and it's something coming out from somewhere else where they need two rows of teeth because maybe they're eating something different than on this planet.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I'm open to that stuff, of course. Like I realize we don't know everything, and God knows what is being hidden from us by the
Right.
government or shadow governments or whatever. What's just interdimensional that we have no proof of yet. I don't know.
And do we have a monarch? Like I said, do we have monarch or was it Apex or whatever that
Oh
they're at
yeah.
now?
Yeah, we
Uh,
might, there might be just be monsters out there that we don't know about.
have you seen any of that? It was on Apple TV,
Mhm.
and it was Monarch, Legacy of Monsters. It's
Oh
on, and
yeah.
I love anything Godzilla, and any of that stuff, and it was pretty cool. But they found out that how they're getting here, that Godzilla and all these other monsters, they're coming through a different part of time. They're not under the ground. They're not in it's not like they're in hollow earth theory stuff, but this is like a different dimension that these things can get the energy to come out, you
Oh,
know.
interesting. Okay.
So, but at the beginning of that anyway, it was kind of funny because they had this, group Monarch, which was started in the 40s, and they were talking, and it was a segment that was in the 70s, and they said something about, there's no way that these things can, still come to this, or or walk in this plane or do that. And they said, yeah. He goes, well, we said the same thing about Bigfoot, didn't we? And how'd that turn out? So I thought that was pretty cool. There was a little shout out right there to say,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, that you know they found out that Bigfoot's the real deal.
And that's our thing. Like, we have our beliefs, we have our opinions of like what these things are, and if we're proven wrong, we're proven wrong. I will
Right,
gladly
right. Oh, right. I'm
I
not
would
gonna,
gladly eat crow if it turns out that we can prove that these things are coming from interdimensional portals.
exactly.
It's not my
I will
current
100% right,
not my currently held opinion, but if evidence comes to that, I will come on air here and be like, yeah, I was wrong. Bigfoot comes from
right,
portals, or it's
right.
dropped down by UFOs or
Yeah,
whatever.
I'm not
But
gonna fight within anybody. I just smile and say, you know what, you could be right.
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't believe it, but it's like that's just the trouble with the Bigfoot world is everybody. It's just nasty, so nasty. I don't believe in that stuff, but when I read it, or I watch shows, there's a lot of different YouTube uh, shows that I watch, and what's his name, Matt Knapp,
hmm
from down south in the Oklahoma, and he'll have different shows on, and he goes through the whole gambit. He doesn't push one thing on another. He just lets the people talk, and he doesn't, he just same thing. You may be right, but when I see a show that Bigfoot saved my little brother from a mountain lion or whatever like that, I just choose not to listen to it. I'm not going to go on there and start typing. You're full of crap. Why are you doing this? You know what I mean? It's just so I pick and choose what would interest me. I mean, when they start saying Bigfoot's the Nephilim, all that, I just was passed by that. But I'm not gonna get on and be a keyboard warrior and tell anybody that you're full of crap. It's not the Nephilim. You don't know what you're talking about because none of us really know what we're talking
yeah,
about.
exactly. None of us know. We're just putting forth our opinions, where we stand, and if we're proven wrong, we're proven wrong. But
Right?
we got to be proven wrong, and we're always up for debate.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
love a good debate, but uh, I just hate when people start with the name calling and, like
Oh,
how do you know
Jesus.
these, show me video of a Bigfoot coming out of a portal and maybe
Right,
we can talk. Don't call me names because of what I believe, or, if I don't
right.
believe what you believe, or if I'm just questioning a story. Like, we're allowed to
Mm-hmm.
question everything, because
Right.
you shouldn't
You
believe
should.
everything you hear or that you're told by the
No,
government, by the
nobody.
authorities, by anybody. Question it.
Except your wife.
Yeah, that's
I say that because she might watch this.
oh, yes.
That's a couple stars right there.
Becky's always right.
Yes, you know that.
I do. I do. She's smarter than us all.
Denying that.
Yeah. All right, brother. Well, this was a cool conversation. Again, with so
Yeah,
much
I'm
more to
glad
talk
you.
about.
I'm glad you decided that because, like I said, I was starting to get some questions with not a whole lot new stories or new discussions that I've heard in quite some time. So I start making up, thinking things in my mind to talk to you about. You know what I mean? That like I said about the size up north and down south. I've been chewing on that for quite a while. And just pondered that thought, and you know,
Yeah, because again, we've
glad
touched
we're able
on
to
it
talk
here or
about it.
there, but it's always been like in the context of other episodes. And we've kind of just spent this much time sort of referencing it and then we move on. But I
Right.
do have people asking me, what are the differences, and why is Boggy Creek creature different than the Patterson creature? And these things all, again, superficially, yeah, it's a big, hairy humanoid, but there are so many like little differences and
So are
yeah.
they? I mean, are they the same? I mean, are we got two or three different whole things going on there? I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know.
and who knows? I mean, in my mind, it's probably very similar to like black bear versus grizzly bear. I mean, they
I
look
would.
superficially. I mean, you look at them, oh, those are both bears.
That's the Occam's razor. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
The way to look at it. The simplest thing, is probably the correct thing. The simplest way. And if I mean, maybe it is. Maybe these are all just one species with several different types and several different subspecies after that. So, maybe they've started at one thing, like I said, but it's still, just that's stuff that make me wonder, are we dealing, are these all really the same thing, or do we have different kinds of stuff going on?
Yeah, me too. Because again, some of them seem to act very primitively and like primates, and then others you hear stories about them doing very human-like things, and they
Well,
look
it's just like
human. And
the story I told you there about the policeman there. They said it was calculating. It
yeah,
was like it was thinking. I mean, it wasn't. It wasn't being aggressive. It wasn't being, but you could just tell, like the eyes are. It's like the things, doing this with the thumbs, and in its mind, it's going, "What am I looking at here?" Like they're saying, "What am I looking at here?" You know what I mean? But it was calculating, and you could tell it wasn't just a blank animal stare. It was something that was, you know, trying to figure out what the hell it was looking at.
yeah, yeah. And
You
you hear
know?
stories like that. You hear where
Yeah,
people talk about the facial expressions, and
yeah,
they'll see these things from a distance, and they say the face changed. It went from like confused to searching, and then to angry, or to
right,
scared, or to surprised. And like, and
exactly,
again, like dogs can do that, and they cock their head or whatever.
right,
Like, that.
right.
But um it is weird how you do have this gamut of human versus primate, and tall and thin versus big and bulky, and aggressive versus shy, and just it just makes
I
you
mean,
wonder.
I'm at right now. It's not whether do they exist or not. It's what are they?
Yeah,
That's just it. What do we put these things in? What do we got to compare it to? You
yeah,
know, it, that's the question.
yeah. Who knows? Questions for another time.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, this is cool. Thank you again so much for coming on. I'm glad we had
Well,
time
thank
to.
you. Anytime, that.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, until we speak again. Thank you, brother. And
More
yeah, if you ever have
you're
any
more than
ideas,
welcome
let me
to help.
know, because you and I, when we get together, we can just talk for hours about stuff. So we got
Oh
to
yeah,
just.
that's why I'll send you something, whether it's I might find it a little interesting, and I'll send it to you just so you can, see what you get, what you pick out of it, if it's the same as what I'm getting out of it,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
type of thing. So I always got that hot direct line to you for that.
yeah, definitely. But yeah, if you could come up with anything, let me know, and we'll do more shows.
All right,
We got
brother.
plenty more. All right, brother. Have a good night.
You too. Take care.
Take care, man. All right. So I want to thank my friend Scott for coming on once again. Always enjoy my conversations with Scott. Got to get up to see him again and have like lengthy conversations. I mean, we try to keep these to about an hour and really focused. When we're together, we just kind of go all over the place and talk Bigfoot nonstop, ad nauseum. So I want to thank Scott for coming on. He's always a trooper. He's always cool to talk to, always has really cool uh, opinions and information. And just let us know what you guys think in the comments below about Bigfoot and the differences and why they seem to be different. Why do they act differently and look differently in the South versus in the North and Alaska? They're huge. Do you guys think there's anything to that? Do you think it's just cultural? Let us know in the comments below. And as I've said, everybody, until next time, question everything. Always question everything. Doesn't mean you disbelieve it, but we need to question everything because that's how we get answers. So until next week, everybody, rock and roll.